Hello and welcome to Improbable Things. I'm J. Grace Pennington and I am here to share 6 improbable thoughts before breakfast, and that would be 6 thoughts about writing or science fiction. So let's get started. So first I thought I would, number 1, update you on how NaNoWriMo is going. It's actually been going really well. I've been able to continue to stay on track. Almost all of that is writing early in the morning, and I actually haven't done mine for today yet, so I'm going to get started on that as soon as I finish up this recording. But I'm almost halfway through. Hopefully, by the end of today, I will be halfway finished because this is day 15, so it's the halfway point. And I am over 23,000 words, so shouldn't be too hard to get to 25,000 by the end of the day, and then I will be halfway through, and that's pretty exciting. I mean, on the one hand, I guess it's one of those glass half empty, glass half full type things, because on the one hand, it's encouraging to know that, hey, I've done half once, I can do the other half too. But on the other hand, you're kind of thinking, oh, I've done this whole, half, and I have to do it over again. So it is a mindset thing, but I am encouraged that I've been able to do it and still stay on top of everything else for the most part. So number 2, kind of on that same vein, when it comes to the process of writing, one thing I am reminded of every time I dive back into writing is that writing is really no fun. And it's a weird dynamic, but I always will get so excited about an idea, and it's very strange because I love writing and I love words and I love stories, absolutely my favorite things in the world. But then I get down to it, and I would say about at least 95% of the process is sometimes absolutely miserable. I mean, I sit down and just suddenly seems that, your brain seems to slow down, the right words don't seem to come, and even I just forget, when you're kind of dreaming up a story in your head, you can tend to forget just the petty logistical things. Like, for instance, maybe I'll have a character in one room and they need to get to the next room for this, part of the story. So then it's, well, do I write that they walked into that room? Or, because that just seems really boring, but I need people to know they got in that other room. So is there an interesting way to say that they got in that room? Or maybe people don't even really need to know where they are. Just all those kinds of things, just the nuts and bolts. And I just find that to be sort of painful to go through and sometimes I find it actually seems more boring when you're writing it than when you go back and look at it later. So the fact that I've been through this so many times does help me with that, because I can kind of push through it knowing that it's actually hopefully not going to be quite as boring on the other side. But even if it is, like I said last week, I can always fix it later. So it's still worth pushing through it. But I just struggle with those types of things. And also just when it comes to the whole showing versus telling, and I want to say that someone is angry, but I'm like, well, I don't just want to say it because that's not as powerful. I want to show it, but then I have to think about that, and so I have to stop writing and think about how to show that they were angry. Just those kinds of mechanical details are just not any fun. But then, moving on to number 3 for today, I'm going to contradict myself and say that writing is so much fun. And it's one of those weird things. If you're a writer, I'm sure you've experienced this, at least to some extent, where it's absolutely miserable and no fun, and it's absolutely amazing and so much fun at the same time. A lot of times in the same session, I'll have some of one, some of another, and it's really great when I can at least get some of the fun stuff. And I do find that this varies a lot, from writer to writer, of course, because we're all different people, but what you find fun will be very different. So for example, one of my sisters is a really talented writer, and she's amazing at writing action and things like that. So for her to say, someone went from one room to another, it would probably be amazing and clever and absolutely just inspiring. But for me, I hate that and I'm not good at it. But what I love and am excited by is the characters and their relationships and their emotions. And so I have so much fun when it comes to these key relationship moments, interactions between people that are really meaningful, or even just emotions. Like I wrote a scene yesterday where the main character just takes a walk and she's been really struggling, but she's able to just have this combination of things coalesce while she's on this walk or jog, where she finds this moment of joy and she's listening to music and it's beautiful outside and she's moving and she just feels this sudden joy at just being alive, being outside, and moving to the music. Like it's just beautiful, and it's just this little reprise from her struggle and just in her day-to-day life. And I have felt that, often, and I got excited when I thought about describing it, and to my great joy, it was just as much fun to write about as it had been to imagine. I was able to really feel those emotions and feel like I was expressing them well on the page, and it just flowed. Like I didn't have to worry as much about the nuts and bolts, because it's really more just what's kind of going on in her head and in her heart, and that flows really easily for me. So I really enjoyed that. We've had a lot of fun with it, and so that for me is the key, is to find those parts scattered throughout. Not, unfortunately, the whole story cannot just be all about emotions. I mean, I guess it could. Maybe that could be some kind of some weird postmodern type of story, but I feel like you have to have some logistics and description and that kind of thing in there. But if I can really anchor the story to those points that are just so fun for me to write, I do think that comes across to the reader, and they can sense the importance of those parts to you, and that can be conveyed to them as well, and they can hopefully really enjoy that. So there's my all my NaNo updates. Again, I'm going to write shortly here for today's word count. Hopefully I'll be able to have some fun excitement in today's session, but who knows? Regardless, I'm going to try to plug through, get today's word count done. So number 4, I wanted to give a little news real quick. I posted about this on my blog last week, but so last year I was part of a collection with a bunch of other authors. I think it was about 5 of us banded together, and we wrote these novellas and published them together in one book. So it was a Thanksgiving themed collection, and there were a few other guidelines. So each of the stories in this collection, so the book is called A Very Bookish Thanksgiving. It's actually out of print right now. However, several of the novellas that went into it are being published as standalones, as ebooks this month, including mine. So the things that tie these together, aside from being Thanksgiving themed, is that all of them are about a character who has a specific love for some classic book, and we could pick whatever book we wanted that to be. And then in addition to them loving this book, elements of it are reflected in their life. So for example, my novella was called Grand Intentions, and the novel that I picked for it to reflect is Great Expectations. So you can kind of see the parallels in the titles there. So it's about a young girl in her early 20s named Pippa, and she longs to be a great writer and tries to write as much as she can, but she has to help her mother. Her father passed away when she was younger, and Pippa has to work and help her mother to bring up her younger brothers, and doesn't have a lot of time for writing. So when her grandmother gives her a huge gift of time away to be alone and to spend most of her time really diving into her writing, she thinks, now surely I'm going to be a success and have everything I've always wanted, but finally has to face that maybe the actual problem was not her circumstances and was actually with her the whole time. So hopefully you can see a little of the Great Expectations theme in there, with someone bestowing, with a benefactor that comes along and lifts someone up, but then they discover they still have problems, basically. So that's my story, Grand Intentions. Just published it as an ebook on Amazon a week or two ago. So it's available there for $2.99 if anyone's looking for a Thanksgiving story to read. Mine in particular actually goes through most of a year. So the fall and Thanksgiving part is at the end, and we go through the other seasons throughout the story. But there's also a few other novellas. I think 3 of the other authors are also publishing theirs. So there are a bunch of Thanksgiving stories floating out there, and you can find some links on my blog for where you can find those, or also if you're interested in helping us promote them, then you can read them for free. There's goodie packs going out to those that are reviewing them for us. So just wanted to kind of get that out there, let y'all know. I'm really excited for Thanksgiving, and I feel like there are not a lot of Thanksgiving stories out there, so it was really fun to be a part of that. So moving on to number 5, talking again about my currently reading. So this month for my book club, the book is The Moon is Down by John Steinbeck, and I've never read any of his work actually, and I'm glad to have a good opportunity to dive in because I would love to read more classic works and more classic authors. And thankfully this is a very short book because this is my book club book for the month, and book club is this Thursday, and I just got the book this weekend because I'd been trying to get it from the library for a while, but I was still, it still wasn't even put on hold for me. Like I was still behind in the line of people to get it. So I finally caved. I took my daughter to Half Price Books for a little date. I picked up that. I let her get a Frozen book and we had a great time, and the book is very small, so it was inexpensive. I should have just done that in the first place, but again, thankfully it's very short, so I've already read almost half of it, and so I can't say yet really my full opinion of it as a story because I haven't, I'm not to the end yet, and I don't even feel like I have a good enough grasp of the story to fully say what it's about. But it is just such a pleasure to read really good writing. It really does make me want to read some more of John Steinbeck's works, particularly some of the classics that he's really known for, because the writing is just so good. And I think it's a pleasure for anyone, but I especially love being able to read through the eyes of a writer, and I feel like the things that I notice, I have such a deep appreciation for. Just a good turn of phrase and really clever way of describing something, or something where you read it and you're like, yes, I completely understand that. I know what he's talking about. And it's just such a joy. Like I just find so much pleasure in reading good writing. And even, aside from the story itself or the plot, which, it seems like an interesting story so far, but just the writing itself, just the prose, I have so much appreciation for it and just love it so much. And I don't feel like I am anywhere near that level in my writing. Like I hope it, like I said, maybe there's some pockets of it where I feel like it flows really well and it's a pleasure to write and hopefully a pleasure to read, but I just do not feel like I'm anywhere close to that achievement where it's just every part of the story is just enjoyable to read just for the words. And I love words so much. Like I love the story part, like I've said, and the emotions, but even just the words. I love words. I love how specific they can be. I love the sound of them. I love how you can, put them together and they have meaning, but then they have different meanings when you put them together. Like I just love the whole art and craft of words. And so I have so much admiration for that. And I feel like John Steinbeck, obviously, I did not discover this. He's a very famous writer, but I'm really enjoying just his writing. So looking forward to finishing this one, and then hopefully maybe I'll put some more of his on my to-read list for the next year. So number 6, I was trying to think of something I could go on a little rant about, and so there's a TV show called Forever. I haven't talked to a lot of people that have seen it because it was canceled after only one season. Probably close to a decade ago at this point. It was a while ago. I watched it when it first came out because it had my favorite actor in it. But anyway, I enjoyed it. It was not the best show of all time. It was definitely, a little corny and had some flaws, but it was a great premise, and the premise is that there is a man who was killed 200 years ago but did not die, and ever since then has been immortal. Every time he dies, he comes back to life, and he doesn't know why. It's not explained. He's been trying to figure out why for like 200 years. And so now he works as a medical examiner at the New York Police Department because he's basically an expert on death. He's died almost every way you can imagine, and so he knows death, intimately. And he also just knows a lot because he's been around for so long. So he has really strong insights into, the murders that take place. He knows a lot of things that, other people could basically not possibly ever know because other people have not died all these times. So it's a very charming, the characters are very charming. The mysteries are pretty good. Like I said, it's a little corny, and there's things, that don't make sense, obviously, about the premise and how it works, and how he keeps coming back to life and all that. But I enjoyed it a lot when it came out and wanted to rewatch it with my husband, and so we just finished last night rewatching it. And because it was canceled after one season, you can tell that in the last 2 or 3 episodes they kind of rushed to kind of wrap it up. I mean, they left it open where you could tell more, maybe, I don't know exactly how it went down, but it feels like watching it that they heard it was probably going to get canceled, but so they kind of wrapped up the main storylines but left some stuff open in case they were able to have more seasons, which sadly they were not. But so even though the last few episodes are enjoyable to a certain extent, you can just feel that rush and how storylines that probably were supposed to unfold over a few more seasons get wrapped up in a couple of episodes. And it's okay, but there is a certain degree to which it's unsatisfying because it's not really told in the most, it's not really told as it was intended to be. And it really should have taken place longer. And you could just feel that rush. Like it doesn't feel completely satisfying. And it got me thinking, what is the best way? If you end up getting some kind of, series, television show, whatever, canceled, my husband and I were discussing, is it better to try to rush and wrap it up real quickly? Or is it better just to have your last few episodes be really good, strong ones, even if it doesn't complete the storylines? And so I was trying to think of a few examples. Forever, I already mentioned that. And a couple of examples from both ends of the spectrum, and both by the same creator, interestingly, is there's a show called Dollhouse made by Joss Whedon, an absolutely brilliant show. I can't really recommend it because of some of the content, but really interesting premise, really weird but clever show. It's really hard to explain the premise, so I'm not going to really try, but it's a very interesting show. I enjoyed it a lot, but it got canceled after 2 seasons. And so in the last few episodes, they wrapped it up by jumping forward to the future and kind of just showing, where everything was going to end up. And so through most of the 2 seasons, you kind of see there's this battle going on where, this one character is starting to realize something's wrong and starting to learn more about herself, and things are slowly unraveling in this weird organization. And so you can see, that would have unfolded more over time, and they would have gradually gotten to a place where they were fighting back. But instead of being able to do that, they have to jump straight all of a sudden to this place where they're fighting back. And they kind of try to fill you in on some of what happened in between, that the 2 timelines. But it was okay, but it definitely you don't have as full of an appreciation for it because you haven't been there for the journey. And it just was okay. I'm not going to say it was a horrible. I think they did the best they could given the circumstances, but again, those last 2 episodes then are just not that strong. So on the other end of that, you have Firefly, very famous example of a canceled show that everybody wishes, the cult following really, really wish would come back. And in that case, I've watched Firefly a couple of times, and also made by Joss Whedon, and it does kind of just get cut off. And every episode is a strong one. I mean, each episode is a good full, story and a